All right, hello everyone, and welcome to another UFC Fight Night. We're headed back to the warehouse. Unfortunately, we got UFC Fight Night Garcia versus Onama. On paper, should be a fun fight. Obviously, not the highest level in terms of like name recognition, but it should be a fun fight overall. Actually, a couple really good fights on this card. In terms of being fun, not necessarily being meaningful for the divisions, but it should be a night where we can make some good picks. Let's get right into it. All right, starting off at strawweight, we got Talita Alencar taking on Ariane Carnelossi. Alencar minus 220, Carnelossi plus 185. Listen, I like Alencar, especially in this spot. Looked pretty good her last time out against someone who she's always gonna be undersized in this division. She is kind of a BJJ or bust type of gal, but she's shown in her couple fights she can be a dog. She can push through adversity. She is a bit of like a tank almost. Like you see the small reach and the small height, and you get a little bit concerned, but she's very strong. She can force those takedowns, and I think she can have a lot of success with the takedowns against Carnelossi, who hasn't really shown as much resistance in the grappling as you would expect from someone that strong and that experience on the ground. Her last win was it was basically a fluke. It was a DQ loss. She was getting her ass beat. She got dropped. She was getting pounded on the canvas by Piera Rodriguez. Obviously, I don't think Talita Alencar is as good as Piera Rodriguez, but I do think this is definitely her fight to lose here, and I think she does capitalize on a really big gap on the ground. I think she gets this fight done by decision. Could see a finish on the ground. Again, like I said, Carnelossi isn't really the most durable or the most, I guess, finish-resistant woman out there, but Alencar should cruise here as long as she can get the takedowns, which I think she does get the takedowns here in this fight. All right, welterweight fight. This is a really good fight. I'm honestly surprised it's this low on the card. One of the more high-level fights on the card, Phil Rowe taking on Seok Hyun Ko. Rowe plus 260 and Ko minus 185. And listen, if you follow my Twitter page, I've been going back and forth. And by the way, down below, if you want to follow my Twitter page, I've been going back and forth on this pick. I was initially picking Rowe in this spot, but after I talked with a couple people and kind of rewatched the film on both these guys, but especially on Phil Rowe, I have to say I am going to pick Ko to win this fight. I just think it just comes out of him being a lot more versatile, having a lot more ways to win the fight. He has a great sambo background. You see in his last fight against Oban Elliott, the trips, the judo throws, the striking as well was on full display in his fight against Igor Cavalcanti on the Contender Series. And I just think his overall, skill set is a lot better, even better than the people Phil Rowe have been facing. And for Phil Rowe, listen, I do get it, right? The killer instinct definitely is there. If he finds someone hurt, if he gets Seok Hyun Ko hurt, I have no doubt he's going to finish Seok Hyun Ko. So Phil Rowe by knockout is interesting. I believe it's like plus 500 right now, and we've definitely seen him pull out a bunch of knockouts in the UFC. But the issue I have with him is his reliability. You see him in tons of fights dropping the first round, not being able to defend the takedowns in some fights, starting really slow. And it's kind of gotten, honestly, worse over the years. You see drop the split decision to Neil Magny, which is just an embarrassing, everyone will say it's an embarrassing performance, and it was. Dropped the decision to Jake Matthews, where he just couldn't defend the takedowns and just was outgunned on the feet, pretty much, just wasn't pulling the trigger. Even against Angelosa, he did not look great up until that finish, right? It was a come-from-behind finish. He was getting pieced up on the feet in that fight. Got dropped pretty badly in the second round, but Phil Rowe's a dog, man. He'll come back, and like I said, he's got killer instinct. Once he got Angelosa hurt and tired, he wasn't letting him off the hook, and he ended up knocking him out brutally in that third round. But I just think Seok Hyun Ko is a level above some of the fighters that Phil Rowe's facing. And, now with this kind of looking back at it and looking back on, some of the fighters' trajectories that both these guys are on, I think Ko's on a big upswing in the welterweight division. Obviously, it'd be kind of funny if he loses because I doubted him big time his last two fights when he was a huge underdog in the Contender Series and a huge underdog on his UFC fight against Oban Elliott. But I think he should win this fight. He's going to be my pick. Again, like I said, the sambo background, extremely impressive. And he should get this one done against Phil Rowe by decision. All right, next fight, another fight at strawweight. Alice Ardelian, taking on Montserrat Conejo Ruiz. Ardelian minus 400, Ruiz plus 300. And listen, you're gonna see this line and you're gonna think, wow, this Ardeleon chick must be like really good. Like she must be the next big thing. And I promise you, and anyone who's watched her fights, they know that she's not, right? She's not even very good, honestly. She's just like a brawler, pretty much. That's all the skills she has, really, in terms of her fighting skills. But honestly, just her size and just the fact that she's willing to slug it out on the feet in a brawl is probably just going to win her that fight alone, right? Montserrat, for all the, she has wrestling experience and for all the accolades she has there, she's just too small to take advantage of any of those, right? 5 foot tall, and she obviously, even just in terms of weight, she's just she's an atom weight that's fighting at straw weight. And Alice is one of the bigger straw weights on the roster. So I think that this is just a terrible matchup for Montserrat Ruiz. Obviously, she is able to get the takedowns. It could be interesting, but I just don't see that happening. Alice is too big for the kind of judo throws, head arm throw takedowns that Montserrat Ruiz has, and once she doesn't get that, she's basically a fish out of water wherever the fight goes, on the feet, off her back. She's basically screwed. So, I just don't think Montserrat's a UFC level fighter. I don't think either of these gals are a UFC level fighter. And I think Ardeleon just being that sort of favorite is crazy, but she should run through her. So I'm picking her by decision. The finish is on the table if Ruiz gets busted up early, but I think she should cruise here. All right, now we're moving on to a pretty actually interesting fight. In the women's bantamweight division, we got Ketlen Vieira taking on Norma Dumont. Vieira sitting at plus 140. Norma Dumont, despite being a very tiny favorite on open, now swelled up to minus 160. And I completely understand, right? Norma Dumont is one of the biggest rising contenders in the women's bantamweight division, right? We've been, kind of, gasping for who's going to be the next big women's bantamweight contender, right? Because it's just stagnant at the top. There's a couple of fighters that have just been there for a long time and they just haven't done anything, right? We got, Juliana. Obviously, Kayla Harrison's a little bit different, but obviously we got, Juliana Pena, Raquel Pennington, Ketlen Vieira, who've just been there and just sitting there. And, I think Norma Dumont's going to be this new blood in the bantamweight division that can do a lot of things. Listen, she used to be kind of a wrestler, type of fighter in her, early UFC run. But she's developed that striking, and that striking is very good. We saw that against Irene Aldana. She absolutely demolished Irene Aldana. Her cut was so deep; it was just like right along her face. It was disgusting. So that was obviously a very impressive performance. I was on Aldana big time in that fight too. I thought Norma couldn't hang on the feet. She absolutely schooled her in Irena's best spot. Now for Vieira, obviously I just think the path to victories for her are just few and far between in this fight. She's not really a finisher. She's just going to have to bring this to a decision. She's just going to have to do mainly holding against the cage and takedowns, right? Even against, Macy Chasson, it wasn't really her initiating takedowns. It's just Macy being a dumbass, which, I guess now we know Macy it is all she is. She's a dumbass. So obviously, Vieira, I have spoken, quite highly of her actually in the past. I've said, this is a tough matchup for Kayla Harrison. I think Vieira is pretty well-rounded, but just looking back at it, I'm very impressed with the work Dumont's putting in. The long layoff is a little bit concerning, but she should beat Ketlen Vieira just with more speed, accuracy on the feet, and be able to stuff those takedowns. So give me Norma Dumont to win this fight by decision. All right, middleweight fight. We got Dante Johnson taking on Cedricos Dumas. Dante Johnson minus 350, Dumas plus 285, and so this is a setup fight for Dante Johnson to shine here, right? He was, a heavyweight actually on Contender Series, short notice. He's moving down 2 weight classes, all the way down to 185 here. And even, look at that picture, right? He was small for heavyweight. And even then, there's still a ton of muscle on this guy. So you got to imagine, despite being 5'8", this dude's going to be absolutely jacked coming into his middleweight debut. And, I think this is just a perfect matchup against Dumas, who had just shown his UFC career, he just can't take the pressure. He can't take powerful shots. And I think that's exactly what Dante Johnson does, He's early in his UFC career or his MMA career and he's still figuring himself out. But I know he can swing hard. I know he can have big power. He's setting down 265-pound men with ease on the regional scene. So I think if he is able to get in Dumas' face and land one of those big bombs, I think it's going to be night-night for SD. So obviously, the UFC experience edge and just the overall technicality, I probably would side towards Dumas. But listen, Dante Johnson's got all the skills to really dominate this fight and put it to Dumas here. So he's gonna be my pick. I got him winning the fight by knockout, early knockout, probably first round. Obviously, if it extends a little bit, it could get interesting. But even then, Dante Johnson isn't someone that just throws a million punches an hour. He does, take his time, kind of let the power come to him. So give me Johnson winning the fight by knockout. All right, bantamweight scrap. We got Timmy Kwamba moving down another weight class. We'll talk about that in a second. Taking on Chang Ho Lee. Timmy Kwamba is a slight favorite, minus 120. Lee is plus 100. And listen, I think this is I know a lot of people are on Chang Ho Lee. He's off an impressive UFC win his last time out against, Cortavius Romeus, which is not a great win at all. But listen, I like Timmy Kwamba in this spot. He's a guy that's really impressed me in his UFC tenure. Despite being 1-2, he's just been really impressing me with his toughness and the dog that he has and his durability. I really, really like his fighting style. And him moving down to bantamweight is a great option because even his last fight, he won at featherweight. And he was, undersized in both of those matchups against Lucas Almeida and against Roberto Romero. Even his UFC debut, he's up 2 weight classes at lightweight. And he still went to a split against Balaji Oki. He went to a split decision. A lot of people thought he won that fight. So, I've seen very impressive stuff from Timmy Kwamba. This is a guy I'm very high on in the UFC. I expect him to deliver, a couple really good performances. I think he could shine against Chang Ho Lee. Listen, for all the good stuff that he does, he is a good grappler. He does have really good ground and pound if he is able to get the fight to the ground. When he's fighting guys that can defend takedowns, he does struggle to get it there, right? We saw that against Long Zhao, where it was a split decision, went a bit of a sketchy decision. And he went like 2 for 11 on takedowns. Yeah, I get it. He was vicious in the clinch and stuff like that, but Long Zhao will allow you to kind of pocket box with him. I don't think Timmy Kwamba is going to allow that. I think he's going to be sharp on the outside, just picking apart this guy from the outside. And we saw that last fight. When he gets that set down in competition, we saw that against Roberto Romero. He was piecing that guy up, landed a huge flying knee. So I expect him to show out on the feet, defend those takedowns. He's going to be the bigger man in this fight. So give me Timmy Kwamba in this fight to win it by decision, but listen, man, you're going to hear from me. A knockout would not surprise me in this fight. All right, light heavyweight division coming up next. Billy Elikana taking on Kevin Christian. Elikana minus 260 and Christian plus 220. I get the concern for Elikana being minus 260. I was actually on him in his last fight when he was a big underdog. But I get the concern, right? Oh my God, this guy is so low volume. This guy's a quitter. He doesn't do anything. But I promise you, Kevin Christian is the worst fighter I've ever seen come out of Dana White's Contender Series. There's been a lot of dog shit come out of that Contender Series. Kevin Christian is complete ass. I promise you that. I promise you. This guy has no technique on the feet. He has no idea what he's doing. It looks like he hasn't attended a single striking class in his life. And even on his back, first of all, 6'7", does not know how to use the height or reach on the feet. Even on the ground, this dude's takedown defense is not great at all. Even when he's setting up submissions when it's long limbs, it's telegraphed. Anyone with any BJJ experience will know how to defend him. Fortunately for him, he was just fighting a guy that was just complete ass as well on the Contender Series, so he was able to use his long limbs to get a triangle. But I promise you, Billy Elikana has the much better technique on the feet, is much more powerful, has much better wrestling, is insanely better almost everywhere. It's just a matter of, does he have the dog in him? Will he, allow himself to be high volume at times in this fight? And if the answer is yes, he's going to fucking smoke Kevin Christian. So, I get the pause for concern on Billy Elikana. I really do, because obviously we've seen that sometimes heart is just enough to win fights alone. I know Kevin Christian isn't, a pussy, and Billy Elikana can be that, but I promise you, if Kevin Christian is as bad as I think he is, this will be the most boring, the worst fight of the night, and Billy Elikana will win a boring decision. So give me him to win by decision. I'm very confident in that pick. All right, moving on, we got a catchweight bout at 130 pounds. This is short notice for Cody Durden as he takes on, who was already on the card, Alan Nascimento. We got Nascimento at minus 300, and Cody Durden, the short notice opponent, is plus 250. And I think this is just a case where the path to victory for Nascimento is much bigger than, or has a much higher chance of happening than the kind of a few paths of victory that Durden has. I know Durden probably is a little bit better on the feet. His chin obviously just is not there, but that isn't really an issue for him in this fight. It's mainly his grappling defense, right? I believe he's about 2-6 to the submission in his career. That's a kind of a big problem in the UFC, especially when you're facing a lot of these guys at flyweight with a huge, a big high level. in grappling, and Alan Nascimento is one of the best dudes at jiu-jitsu in the flyweight division, right? This guy was rolling with Joffrey Filo and coming out on top at a lot of those scrambles. Even when this guy's threatened on the ground, he's able to stay calm, work out of the position, end up on top. In every single scramble he had with Jafel Filo, he ended up on top. So I have no doubt that even if his takedown defense fails him in this fight, he'll be able to get up on top. Cody Durden's control isn't the best, so I think he's going to be able to sweep if he's on bottom. I believe if he initiates takedowns, he could have success in this fight. Even on the feet, right? We've seen in his last couple fights, it doesn't take much for Cody Durden to fall. So I think Nascimento just has a lot of paths of victory in this fight. Cody Durden, for as much of a dog as he is, right? I'm not going to discredit him being a dog because this guy is tough as shit for the division, but or not tough, or not. He's got a lot of heart in him, but I just think this is way too much on short notice for him, especially as he's aging. So give me Onama Nascimento to come out and win by submission in this fight. All right, welterweight fight between the two chinniest guys in the welterweight division. We got Charles Radke, and look at that tattoo, man. Blood Brother Pride. I've never seen a more corny tattoo than that. I'm just gonna be completely honest. That is a corny ass tattoo. But he's taking on Daniel Frunze. Radke, obviously the favorite here, minus 170. Daniel Frunze plus 145. And so I fully understand Radke being the favorite. I understand picking Radke. I actually am going to pick Radke here because I believe the path to victory for him is just a lot. There's a lot more for him. He can obviously win on the feet. We've seen Frunze get dropped, I believe, 4 times in his last 2 fights, which is just obviously a huge red flag, especially when it's to guys like Vadim Kutsi and Reese McKee, who Reese McKee is like 1-4 in the UFC. So, but one thing you can't say about Daniel Frunze is he doesn't have heart. This guy absolutely has heart. This guy is an absolute dog in there. If he senses that you're tired at all, this guy will drown you. And we saw that in the Vadim Kutsi fight. He drowned him in that fight. Ended up getting that body shot finish. Even in the Reese McKee fight, you see Reese McKee slowing down. I promise you, if that second round would have started, Frunze would have knocked him out. So obviously that isn't what happened, right? He had a ton of damage on his face. The doctor stopped the fight. So it is what it is. But I just think Radke's going to have more paths to victory. He obviously banging out on the feet. He has power himself. Got a couple knockouts in the UFC. But I just also think if he is, not getting the success he has on the feet, the takedowns are right there for him too. And we've seen Frunze in the regional scene. He's got submitted a couple times, struggled with takedowns. So I think Radke, I can trust Radke to, if the striking isn't working for him, go for the takedowns. He's obviously dangerous over there too. Obviously the chin is a big issue. This guy getting finished a lot. So if he does start to get tired against Daniel Frunze, I'll be like, oh, okay, he's fucked. But I think he'll be okay in this fight. Obviously got to respect the toughness of Frunze, but I just don't think his skills are quite ready for the UFC level. So give me Radke to win the fight by decision. All right, featherweight fight. We got Isaac Dulgarian taking on Yadier Del Valle. Or, I don't know, I probably said that wrong. Dulgarian plus 240, Yadier plus 205. And so I completely respect the people on Yadier Del Valle. This guy made a splash in the Contender Series and at his UFC debut. First of all, his Contender Series fight was absolutely insane. If you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend watching that. He absolutely beat the shit out of that guy. But in his UFC fight, he did what he was supposed to against not a UFC level caliber opponent, Connor Matthews. He absolutely beat the shit out of him. So obviously, I can't really blame him for the level of comp because he's been doing what he's supposed to do to these guys. He's beating the piss out of them. So all props to him. But Dulgarian is just a different type of wrestler, man. He has not even sniffed the level of competition that Isaac Dulgarian is. This guy is a nasty wrestler. I know people are saying, oh, this guy's just laying prey. This guy's laying prey. He got tired versus C-Rod. Bullshit. He won that fight. There's no doubt he won that fight, right? That was, he absolutely got at least 1 10-8 round that fight. Even if round 1 and 3 were 10-8s, he won that fight. I don't want to hear anyone saying Rodriguez won that fight because he didn't. So he should be undefeated. But, that aside, like I said, this guy is very, very dangerous on the ground. Nasty ground and pound. A great submission game as well. Got a submission in his last performance. So I expect him to be able to control most of this fight with the takedowns and the control. I think he's improving his cardio too. We saw him go the second round in that last fight, and he looked pretty fresh. So I think he's going to be comfortable in this fight, wherever the fight goes. Obviously, Del Valle has the power, and if he has the power, he can obviously put anyone's lights out. So we got to keep an eye on that. But I just think this is a chance of him getting pushed too much a little bit too soon. So give me Bulgarian to win this fight by decision. Obviously, I respect the shit out of Yadier Del Valle, and I think he can be someone in the future. Just too much too soon for me. All right, welterweight feature fight. We got Jeremiah Wells coming back after, I believe, 1.5 years away, taking on Temba Garimbo. Wells sitting at plus 120, Garimbo at minus 140. And this is another one of these fights I've been going back and forth on as well, because both these guys are very, very inconsistent fighters. Both these guys have, lost to guys they probably shouldn't have lost to. With Wells, that his last 2 performances have been very, very lackluster in my opinion. Right, the submission loss to Carlson Harris. I mean, that says everything. And then you have losing a split decision to 2024 Max Griffin, which no words needed. No other words needed. That's a pretty bad loss. So, but those 2 losses aside, he's looked pretty good in the UFC. Obviously a little bit on the chinny side, but is able to kind of overcome it in his fights. But he's taking on Temba Garimbo, who's also kind of, looked lackluster in his last few fights. Obviously he's 2-1 in his last 3 fights, but you look at the way he's winning, it's not very impressive. It's with takedowns, control. Obviously he starts Pete Rodriguez, but that is what it is. And then against Vicente Luque, who we've seen in the past couple fights is just not the same guy anymore. He bitched Temba Garimbo, right? Knocked him down immediately, submission. So, obviously, I think the path to victory for Jeremiah Wells is there, right? He can land big power, but, just the striking technique from what I've seen from him, it's just not very good. We saw in the Jeremiah Wells fight, or the Max Griffin fight, the dude was swinging so hard, over-swinging so hard, the dude was falling out of his own feet. So, obviously, like I said, the danger factor for Wells is there. He can use BJJ as a very high-level black belt. So if he ends up on top or is able to land one of those big bombs, I do expect him to finish the fight, right? Because Temba Garimbo is a guy that can get finished. But I think Garimbo, with his superior striking technique, with the takedowns, the control, because Wells has been taken down in the past. So I think Garimbo can control with wrestling here in this fight. And obviously, just as I said, his striking technique should be superior. And if he is able to land one of those powerful shots on Wells, he can turn the lights out. But give me Garimbo low confidence here, but I think Garimbo can win a decision in this fight. All right, co-main event of the evening. This is actually a fight, one of the only fights in the heavyweight division I'm actually pretty hyped for. We got Waldo Cortez Acosta taking on Ante Delia. Delia minus 135 and Cortez Acosta plus 115. You see me earlier in the week when Delia was the underdog. I immediately scooped him up as my underdog of the week because I love this fight for him. And I just love the skill set he brings to mixed martial arts. You see me in that fight with Marcin Tybura saying he's going to smoke him, and he was even odds, and he was even an underdog. When that fight closed, and I said he was going to smoke him, he was going to smoke him, and that's exactly what he did. He smoked him. Because this dude has great striking, good power, a willingness to get inside the pocket and brawl, which not a lot of these heavyweights at the top level do. And he's got a chin, and he has wrestling too. He has everything. He has everything you want from a heavyweight. So, and he's also really light on his feet for a 35-year-old, which I really like. And I think in this fight especially, that's going to do him a lot of justice against Waldo, who's basically, at this point, just a striker, right? And he can certainly win this fight, even just as a striker, because, he is a high-volume dude. He is insanely tough. We saw in that Pavlovich fight, I don't think people talk enough about the chin that Waldo Cortez Acosta showed in that fight. He takes some big shots that would have put out a lot of heavyweights, and he was still standing there. He was unfazed by those shots. So I got to give a lot of credit to Waldo for that performance against Sergey, despite being on the losing side. But listen, I think he's just running into a bit too much for him in this fight, right? The takedowns are going to be there for Delia. I think he can swarm Cortez Acosta on the feet. I know Cortez Acosta has, there's maybe the sharper striking, but there's not a ton behind it in terms of power. And he does tend to slow down as fights progress. We've seen him getting a bit lackadaisical with his striking. So give me Ante Delia in this fight to come out here and win by decision. Like I said, I respect the toughness of Waldo. If Ante does find a submission, I wouldn't be surprised, but I do expect Waldo to be able to survive for at least a little bit in this fight. All right, main event time at featherweight. Steve Garcia taking on David Onama. Garcia at minus 130 right now. David Onama plus 110. And listen, this should be a banger fight for as long as it lasts, right? Because these two guys are finishers for this weight class, right? Both guys knockout artists, but both also, sneakily well-rounded In my opinion, I just don't think they had to use it. Right, they've just been knocking people out in this weight class. I think for Garcia especially, people don't know that he actually has really good wrestling and top control and ground and pound. I just don't think we've been able to see it as much. But when he gets that ground and pound going, man, he's vicious. We saw that when he gets on top of guys, he finishes people. Right, in the Melky Costa fight, when Melky Costa got tired and gave up, the ground control, he was a bloody mess afterwards. It looked like a horror movie. And then against Kyle Nelson, of course, when he was threatened early in that fight, was able to scramble, get out of that back take, and eventually, and he was on top of Kyle Nelson. He pounded his face into the canvas. So, listen, in that Calvin Kattar fight, he dropped Calvin Kattar, who's, obviously washed as all get out, but he's a tough dude. So that even deserves respect by itself. So I think Garcia can add a lot to the table. Obviously, there is a danger when you face Onama because this dude is lightning fast on the feet, and this dude has very good takedown defense. So, you're not just going to go in here and smoke a guy like Onama. It just doesn't happen. No one does that. But there are two things I have concerns with for Onama. One is that he's a bit on the chinny side, in my opinion, right? He's been seen, and he's got rocked pretty bad his past 2 to 3 fights, in my opinion, right? We saw against Giga Chikadze was able to stun him in the first round. And we saw even Roberto Romero hurt him bad in that first round. And he was minus 2,000 versus Roberto Romero, and Romero had him in all sorts of trouble in that fight. So, obviously, those two things are apparent. Listen, Onama can definitely knock out Garcia. Garcia's been knocked out before. If Onama comes in here and gets a first-round knockout, wouldn't be surprised. But we've seen Onama slow down in the past, and we've seen Onama, accept positions to certain guys in the past. And I know one thing, and that Steve Garcia looked absolutely great with his cardio his last fight. So if Garcia is able to weather an early storm, kind of take over with the unorthodox striking and the long-range striking, I think he can definitely put Onama's lights out in this fight. Again, these guys are absolute dogs. They're going to swing in the pocket, and someone's going to go down. I just think it's going to be Garcia that's going to land his power in this fight and put out David Onama. So give me Garcia by knockout. And that is the end of the breakdown. So again, once again, I say this all the time. I thank you guys so much for watching. We had our biggest week last week for UFC 321. Had the most viewers we've ever had. So that's obviously a big, thank you from me for that. But, let's hope we can build off this momentum, sort of get the channel going. Thank you guys so much. I hope you guys have a great weekend.